Hey everybody, I want to talk about the Christian doctrine of creation. Now, this has a very broad and far-reaching uh, dialogue and importance here. And so I'm going to try to be as concise as possible while trying to articulate really what Christians are thinking about whenever they start talking about creation. So our primary way of thinking about a doctrine of creation is looking at the Bible, looking at the creation narratives that we see in the book of Genesis. And I'll show you really quickly if I can. That's what we're going to do here in just a second. We're going to look at the creation narratives that we see in Genesis, the first one in Genesis 1, and then the next creation narrative in Genesis 2. But before we get there, we need to try to figure out, well, what type of literary genre are we going to be looking at? Now, whenever scholars talk about the creation narratives, they generally talk of two or three different literary genres, and they use these terms all interchangeably. And so I want to spend a couple of minutes unpacking what are the genres, what are the goals of those genres, and then we'll actually start reading. So, two of them I have listed right here. One of the literary genres is known as primeval history. You could get rid of the word primeval and say pre. So these are pre-history books or stories. Another term that scholars like to use is epic literature. And epic literature is what we're going to be talking about here in a second. And you're familiar with epic literature. If you've read the Epic of Gilgamesh, if you have read the Odyssey, the Iliad, if you have read Beowulf, then you are familiar with epic literature. So we're going to try to unpack what are the goals of epic literature. So what is primeval history, or what is epic literature? Well, according to this scholar, as he's a Hebrew Bible scholar, he says that primeval history refers to the earliest ages of human culture. So the primeval story is not history as we ordinarily use the term. Please get that. These prehistorical writers were not trying to record the historical events of what happened. Okay, so even a moment's reflection, he says, indicates that the earliest events of creation had no human eyewitnesses. They had been passed down through the text that could hardly be seen or be based on firsthand reports. So he says these stories are mostly legends or sagas. So let's try to push this definition a little bit further, because if they are not history, then what are they? So let me ask this question. Pause and think about this for a second. A myth. Commonly used by our society, do we think that myths are true? Okay, there's that show on Discovery Channel, Mythbusters. Oftentimes you'll hear somebody say, oh, it's just a myth. Because whenever we think of the term, most of us say, well, a myth is not true. And I want to press that issue a little bit. So here, I actually think that Wikipedia can be helpful sometimes, and I think that their definition really does a pretty good job at getting at the heart of the issue. So they say that a myth is a sacred narrative. Okay, the first clause here, it's a sacred narrative in the sense that it holds religious or spiritual significance for those who tell it. In other words, the first thing we can deduce here is a myth is true for the people who tell the myth. So the people of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now that may not be a true myth for me, living in the 21st century, but it for sure was a very true myth for the people who wrote it. So how can a myth be true then? How can a myth be profoundly true? Well, it is true in how it, and please understand this, how it contributes to and expresses systems of thoughts and values. So it is not true in the sense that it tells a factual story, but it is true in how it expresses systems of thoughts and values. Let me give you an example here. Here's, my daughter is going to be born here within a month. That's when I'm recording this. And soon we're going to start reading her little stories. Say, for example, the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Now, if I were to ask you, what is Little Red Riding Hood about? You might say, well, it's about a girl who was taking, wine and bread to her grandma, and she was swallowed by a big bad wolf. Now, in here, like stop the video and go read Little Red Riding Hood. It'll take you 5 minutes. Upon reading Little Red Riding Hood, you know that it is a true narrative, not because, get this, not because there was actually a girl who was wearing a red hood, but because it is really fundamentally talking about the importance of not straying too far from the path. Okay, it is a narrative about the move from naivete to knowledge, to understanding. And sometimes you know that that move can be very good and can be very liberating. You also know sometimes that the move from naivete to knowledge can be very difficult. And so Little Red Riding Hood is true in how it expresses these true statements about life. Okay, it contributes to and expresses systems of thoughts and values. Now here, I wish that they would have changed one word. Use of the term by scholars implies neither the factuality, so the truth or the falseness of the narrative, because so here, let me unpack that. Scholars don't care if these are factual narratives. Was there a guy named Gilgamesh? Maybe. Was he searching for everlasting life? Maybe, I guess. Did he have a conversation with a talking serpent? Probably not. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, was there actually literally a tree of life? No. Is the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh true for the people who told it? Absolutely. So therefore, to the source culture, however, a myth is by definition true. Get this, it is true in that it embodies beliefs, concepts, and ways of questioning and making sense of the world. So a primeval story, an epic piece, or a myth, by definition is true because it contributes and expresses a system of thoughts and values, or it embodies beliefs, concepts, and ways of making sense of the world. Look back at the literary tradition of whatever tradition you're a part of. Is the point of a lot of the stories that you are familiar with to say this actually happened? Or is it to embody beliefs and concepts of ways of making sense of the world? So, epic literature here, I'm just going to briefly breeze through this. They are, in other words, like encyclopedias. They're poetry. They're not just history, they're poetry. Because poetry is about truth. Poetry is about meaning. Poetry is about the depth of reality. It is not simply trying to say what just happened. So here are a couple of examples. If you go to if you go to the Louvre in Paris, if you go to the British Museum in England, you will see many of these symbols of ancient epics, ancient myths. Are these narratives true for you and me? No, probably not. Were they true for the people, the cultures who gave rise to them? Yes. Why? Because they acted like encyclopedias, because they fully embodied these beliefs and concepts of that society. And so here we can look at the Bible. Does the Bible have epic or myth or primeval history? Absolutely, it does. Now, whenever we talk about the primeval history, the epic literature, the myth in the Bible, most scholars look at the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis. These are the chapters that a lot of biblical scholars look to understand myth. So let's look at this slide for a second. Why were creation narratives written in the first place? Now, if you were to just pause this video and do a Wikipedia search on creation narratives, you would find quite literally dozens, if not hundreds. So think about this. Based on what we've said so far, why does virtually every ancient culture have their own creation narrative? Is it, number one, because like all of these ancient cultures were there when the creation happened, and they are trying to say how the creation happened? Or do they recognize the power of literature in how literature can express comprehensive systems of thoughts and values, comprehensive ways of making sense of the world? So then, therefore, what are the primary purposes of creation narratives? Well, look at this. To answer the fundamental questions of that given society. Okay, to answer the fundamental questions of that given society. So, therefore, what then are the fundamental questions of societies? Think about that for a second. What are the fundamental questions of society? Could it be, what does it mean to be human? Who are humans? What makes a human unique? Another fundamental question of society, what is our job as humans? What are we supposed to do? Another question, who is God? Is there a God? Did God create this world? If so, what is God like? Another question, what do we say about the world? Is the world good? Or is the world bad? Notice these are like deep and philosophical and very hard and difficult questions. They are not easy. They cannot be answered in a 2-minute discussion or in even a 30-minute or 40-minute video. These are the deepest questions of life that society has wrestled with over and over and over again throughout the last several hundred, if not thousand years. And so that's what we're going to be trying to talk about today, these fundamental questions. I don't know if you are aware, but there are two creation stories in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. They are written at different times. This first one was written around the time of the destruction of the Jewish temple. You should remember that from the New Testament class. And this creation narrative has a specific pattern. Think for a second. Why in oral tradition societies do they have patterns? It's easy to remember. Okay, if these narratives follow a specific pattern, it's easy to remember. It's easy to retell over and over and over again. Now, in this first creation narrative, it all goes in threes. There are 3 types of animals. There are 3 types of plants. There are 3 types of water animals. And even creation itself has 3 different tiers. So let me show you really quickly. This is what the ancient people thought that the creation of the world looked like. This is the ancient Jewish conception of the universe. Okay, I told you there were 3 realms. There was the realm below the earth, there was the realm of the earth, and there was the realm above the earth. This is what the ancient Jews thought that the end of the world looked like. So please look at this. And I'm going to come back to this here in just a second. So let's actually start reading this first creation narrative. Again, your goal is to probably read along with me and then also think, how are the fundamental questions answered? Questions about God, questions about the universe, questions about humanity, and questions about creation. So let's begin. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't say when, but when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void. Okay, the words in Hebrew are awesome. The word earth was a tohu vabohu, a chaotic void or formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Please notice something earlier on. This first creation narrative says that God created the world out of a chaos of matter. We're going to get back to that later on. This first creation narrative says that God created the world out of chaos, out of pre-existent material. So while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters, and then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And then moving on, and then God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." I'm going to skip over this. You can read that on your own. Now, on day two, we have the Jews believe this creation, what is known as the firmament. This dome is kind of a firm, flat thing that they believed kept the waters from above the dome from the waters that were below the dome. Now, think about this. If you're an ancient person, how in the world do you explain rain? Well, you believe, if you were a good Jew, that there was an ocean, that there were waters up here, and that there were little floodgates that would open up and allow rain. So that's what they believed happened on day two. Now, here, and God said, let the waters underneath the sky be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called sea. And God saw that it was good. Now, here we're going to break the pattern. And then God said, so whenever there's a break in the pattern, you listen up, you pay attention. And then God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, number one, plants yielding seeds, that's number two, and fruit trees of every kind, which bear fruit with seed in it. And it was so. And so therefore the earth brought forth vegetation, number one, plants yielding seed of every kind, number two, and trees, fruit trees of every kind, that bear fruit with seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, there was morning, the third day. Notice here, at the end of these days, God calls his creation good. Okay, that's going to be important later on. And then on day three, and God said, let there, this actually is going to be day four, forgive me. On day four, God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky, and let it separate the day from the night. And let there be signs for the season, the days, and the years. Again, you can read this on your own. So on day four, they believed that God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. Let me keep going. And God said, this is going to be day five now, and God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky. So again, tell me, how many types of water animals are there going to be? There's going to be three. So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature of every kind, and every creature with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. Again, this word shows up again. This is the first time we see the word blessing. So, and God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth of the waters of the sea. Let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, there was morning, the fifth day. Let's pause for a second. How many animals do we have? Do we just have two? Do we have an unknown number? When it says God created living creatures of every kind, or birds of every kind, notice that is plural. So what types of species of birds? Well, we don't know. Birds, tons of birds. Maybe this is talking about now the filling in or the ordering of creation. As we said at the very beginning, creation began as a chaotic formless void, and now creation is getting order. It is being filled in. And God said, now we're going to be in day 6, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind. There's going to be cattle, number 1, creeping things, little spiders, number 2, and wild animals of every kind. And it was so. And God made the wild animals of every kind, the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw again that it was good. Now here, let me address really quickly this plural term for God. A lot of scholars look at this and say, well, maybe this is just probably talking or reflecting the polytheism or the henotheism of the day. Okay, this was a Jewish text written by Jews who believed that there was one God, and yet they did recognize that there were other gods around. So don't make too much, if you need to, of this plural us. So then God said, let us make humankind in our image and according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and over every living creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Let's pause for 1 second. we need to look at these two words in Hebrew. This word in Hebrew, humankind. Okay, if you are reading this in your Bible at home, you likely have a little subscript underneath this, or right next to this letter or this word, that will take you down to the bottom of your Bible where it will say Hebrew, and the Hebrew word for human or humankind is Adam, A-D-A-M. Interesting that the word Adam or the word Adam means humankind. Okay, we're going to come back to that. And then this word here, dominion, in Hebrew it means care. It means to care for, to be a caretaker. So let's keep going. So God created Adam, God created Adam, God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Let's pause for a second again. How many humans do we have? How many humans do we have here? Do we just have two? No. In this first narrative, we have an unnumbered amount of humans. 1 million? 200 million? We don't know. We do know that there are two types of humans, male and female. But we know that God created humankind. Again, the term Adam is not necessarily the name of a man, but it means human. God created humankind in his image, humanity in his image. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion, remember, have care, be caretakers over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves upon the face of the earth. And notice one last time. And God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was not just good this time, but it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. So thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude, and on the seventh day God finished the work that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. And so God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done. Okay? This is the end of the first creation narrative. Because look here, this is not in the biblical text, this is just a commentary of it. But notice where we're going to go in the next video. This is another account of a doctrine of creation. Interesting. The Jews have two creation narratives sitting side by side. In that first narrative, did you ever hear of a man named Adam? No. Did you ever hear of a woman named Eve? No. Is it a very unique creation narrative? Absolutely. That's where we're going to turn right now. So here is another picture of what the creation in the first creation narrative looks like. Remember, you have this firmament, you have waters up here, you have floodgates. The sun, moon, and stars are within this. You have water on the earth, above the earth, below the earth. You have water animals down here, the big old hairy monsters. Here you have fish, frogs, tadpoles, and up here you have birds. Here are the days of creation. Remember, in day 1, day 2, day 3, all we are doing is we are organizing the chaos. Day 4, day 5, day 6, we are filling in the chaos. So here, and let me try to push this issue. And I understand this is difficult for some people, and so I want to do this as mature, in such a mature manner as possible. Remember, what is the goal of these creation narratives? To answer fundamental questions. Based on the modern understanding of cosmology, did the Jews get this right? And again, I mean this in the best academic way possible. Did the Jews get this right? So they didn't. You and I know that there is not a firm, flat thing that is keeping the waters from above the world from the waters down below. You and I know that the sun, the moon, and the stars are not within this firm, flat thing. You and I also know that the earth is not floating on these foundations of the earth in a great sea or a great ocean. So did the Jews get that right? Well, they didn't. And again, in the highest level of academic integrity, did the Jews get this right? Probably not. Go back to the earlier definition. These narratives are profoundly true, say scholars, because they contribute to and express systems of thoughts and values. And so here, remember our basic questions, our fundamental questions. Who is God? What does it mean to be human? What is the role of humanity? Did Genesis 1 get these answers correct? Again, the deeper questions of life, absolutely. So let's talk for a second. How is God portrayed in this first creation narrative? Well, God is controlling. God creates by just speaking, by saying a few words, let there be light, and whoom, there was light. So in the first creation narrative, the Jews want us to know that God is controlling, that God is in control. And I'm going to skip this one and come back to it. If God can speak by, or can create by just speaking, God is pretty powerful. Because the ancient Jews and subsequently the Christians believed that God created the heavens and the earth, so therefore God is powerful. This is a God who is almighty. This is a God who has might, who has power. This is a God, although it's not on here, who is sovereign, who is in control, who is worthy of worship. Again, we're going to do the second creation narrative in the next video. So that is who God is. That is how God is portrayed in this first creation narrative. So what about humans? Well, we know in this first creation narrative that humans are equal. They are created at the same time. They are equal in the eyes of God. Now, we also know that humans are created in God's image. We spend a lot of time later on talking about what this really means. Humans actually have a job. So if we were the early people for whom this was profoundly true, well, what does it mean to be human? It means that we work. We have dominion over the earth. In other words, we are caretakers of the earth. I am doing this video on the 16th of June 2015. And here in a couple of days, the Pope is going to issue his second encyclical. A papal encyclical is a teaching of the church, and it's going to be on climate change. His argument is consistent here with this biblical account of creation, that humans have a responsibility and a role to care for the earth. So I want to wind this video down, and we will do the second creation narrative here in the next video. But I want to remind you that we are here trying to answer these fundamental questions. Who is God? What does it mean to be human? And here, what is the job of humanity? And let me flip back over here to answer our third question. I want to go back, actually, because the third question is going to be on creation. Do Christians and Jews believe that the creation is good or evil? Please remember, and God saw all the work that he had done, or that he had made, and indeed he said it was very good. So what do Christians say about the world? Well, they say the world is good. Okay, that God created a good world. So let me say this one more time. Do Jews and Christians alike believe that these narratives are true? Absolutely. Okay, they do. They are true in how they express a larger system of thoughts and values. They are true in how they answer the fundamental questions. And these, my friends, are the fundamental questions. Who is God? What does it mean to be human? What is the vocation? What are the jobs of humans? And then finally, is creation good or bad? In the next video, we're going to see how the second creation narrative answers these exact same questions and try to talk about how, although they come to different conclusions, they can both be inherently true.